Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for one more minute to allow others to sign in. Thank you.
So let's start, shall we? I think everybody's here. Welcome to episode 2 of Microlink's Great Change, Great Women. And we have a very great woman for you today. The wonderful Christine Hemphill, founder and managing director of Open Inclusion. Hopefully she's going to put her camera on in a minute. Christine, you're going to join us? I'd like to see your...
Sorry, I had my camera on.
There you are. Hello and welcome.
How are you? Lovely to be here.
Very, very happy to have you. And we've been chatting just briefly earlier, and you are in Switzerland?
Just across the border in France, but in the Alps.
Wow, amazing. Lucky you. And I suppose the sun's shining there.
It is today. Not for long, sadly. I think it's changing for Easter weekend for us, but it is today. It's lovely.
I think it is for us as well. But anyway, just a few quick housekeeping things. There will be a Q&A at the end, so please put any questions in the chat. Please be respectful to all others. We want everyone to feel welcome, safe and respected. The accessibility features are the captioning services provided today by MyClearText. If you'd like to see the captioning, switch on the captioning at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Closed captioning shows subtitles. And you can follow the conversation with hashtag Great Change, Great Women on social media. So then we're going to have Nasser. Nasser's the CEO of Microlink, and he knows Christine very well. So it's a nice chat amongst friends.
And thank you very much, Anna. And welcome to everyone. Our second guest, Christine. She's known to most of you who are in accessibility space, and she's been one of the early starters and you could say pioneers of how to design platforms to be accessible, do it early rather than as a retrofit. She'll explain all that. And I'm really delighted she could join us. It was a short notice. She was meant to be coming later in the month. However, unfortunately, due to circumstances, our other great guest, Caroline, couldn't make it. Hopefully, we'll bring her back on a different session. But I'm delighted Christine could move things around for us. So thank you, Christine, and welcome. And please.
Pleasure. It's lovely to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Nessa.
Thank
you. Pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
I'm just going to do a little bit of background about you so that everybody listening in and seeing you can understand your background. So Christine is the founder and managing director of Open Inclusion, an inclusive insight, design and innovation agency based in London and operating across the UK. She is an economist by trade, a researcher, designer and innovator by practice, and a practical, systemic problem solver by nature. She helps organizations improve consumer experiences across all brand touchpoints, digital, physical, customer service and brand communications through a deep understanding of the needs of people with lived experiences of disability and older consumers or employees. Open provide this by conducting high quality inclusive user research and design support, usually through engaging Open's diverse insight community of over 500 people with specific access and age-related perspectives. Christine has been leveraging digital capabilities, specifically including emerging technologies for over 2 decades to solve unmet consumer needs, solve them better or more efficiently. She leads the global inclusive design for XR community for XR Access, is an advisor for a number of highly innovative digital startups in fintech, health tech, and Robotic Mobility, and is an advisor to the British Standards Institute Committee for Wayfinding. Open Inclusion is a global expert partner for the Valuable 500 and pan-disability research partner for the RNIB and the Business Disability Forum. Christine has a combined degree of Bachelor of Economics and Bachelor of Arts in Asian Studies and an MBA, and is a member of the Market Research Society and CPACC with the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. Wow.
Well done, Emma. That was a mouthful.
It was a mouthful, but wow. I mean, very accomplished. Yes, I mean, all the ladies, the wonderful women we've got on this series, they're just blowing us away every week. You know, it's just incredible, the achievements and the dedication. Yeah, it's impressive, and we're very honoured to host you all and hopefully expand the knowledge of what you do, why you do it, and you know, what the outcomes, what you hope for the outcomes to be in the future. So anyway, my first question, what do you spend most of your time doing? As I understand, you are or were a triathlon athlete. Is that right?
So that's a great question, and there's two very different answers, because what do I spend most of my time doing is plotting the downfall of exclusion by design in society. So using design to remove the very significant exclusion that exists in society today. So that's the what am I doing. The what did I do, and it really is a bit of an I was, but a decade ago I was a professional athlete, a triathlete for Australia. Interestingly, it was a journey that started with an inclusion driver, and interestingly, so the first triathlon I did after my children were born was actually to raise money for a research foundation for muscular dystrophy, because we have some significant lived experience of disability in my family, and that was triggered at that time. That sent me off to do a triathlon. Weird and wonderful story, but it meant I went down the road quite late in life, as you said, a couple of decades in innovation and design. I've got the grey hairs to prove it. So quite late in life, I became an athlete, and accidentally kind of fell my way into that through wishing to do something to actually recognise this change in life that my family was going through at the time.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't imagine the discipline that you need to do a triathlon. I mean, that's
well, it's fascinating. We were talking about it before this, you know, just before we started today, that so much of what I did as a professional athlete has been such a brilliant grounding for being an entrepreneur. So a high performance business is very like a high performance athlete. You need focus and consistency. Despite the fact that triathlon's an individual sport, you actually need a really high quality team, and to trust them to do the bits that they do so you can do the bits you do really well. And then Grant Hackett, who's an Australian athlete, you know, one of Australia's greatest athletes, and a swimmer, he talks about that, always looking for the 0.01%, turning up every day to look and challenge yourself to that 0.01%. But if you do that day in and day out, and that consistency of focus and effort, it's amazing what you can change and what you can challenge. And that's exactly the same in this space, that this is an endurance sport, changing social culture, digital capability and environments. So always looking to just make it a little bit better at the end of the day than you started it with.
Yeah.
We're in life, we always have that knee point where things just go really slow and then suddenly exponentially shoot up. Well, have you seen that happen in the digital accessibility, or are we still getting there?
Absolutely. And you know, many years of little bits of change can line up, and all of a sudden it feels like there's this breakthrough moment that happened overnight. But of course, any of us that were working in that space knows that there was a decade of, you know, hundreds of or thousands of people's effort that went into making that moment happen. You know, in digital accessibility, I think some of those particular change points that I've seen in my career have been things like the introduction of voice technology and voice UI, that this came out of assistive technology. Voice UIs have been used by people with sight loss for decades, but now they're being used, in our living rooms with Alexa or Google Home that we talk to, or on our phones when I'm out still doing some training. And I have a great idea because I'm quite often listening to, that's where I catch up on my audibles and my reading. And I'm taking voice notes, and that's now available to all of us in a mainstream way. And the pickup has happened exceptionally quickly. But the decades of effort that went into that last couple of years of very rapid pickup came out of an inclusion first perspective.
And do you find that the leaders, the planners are also on board with this, or is it just like the practitioners now seeing the possibility?
It's a very interesting question, and the answer, like all good questions, is it depends. So there are some leaders of organisations, and my gorgeous friend Caroline, who was going to be here today but couldn't, from Valuable 500, has really found some of those brilliant leaders out there at the CEO level that get this, that genuinely see both the social impact and the commercial impact of understanding and addressing inclusion more strategically in their organisations. There are other organisations that wait until they've been sued, or until they've had a major complaint, or until they're facing really significant costs from retrofitting changes late in the process, before they kind of go, oh yes, we could have done something about that. And even when they do, they might not come to it in the most open way. Let's recognise there's bias here. Let's recognise that people have different experiences. Not everyone has a lot of lived experience personally or through their family in disability. So some people will just intuitively get this. Some people are also just intuitively, I think, more open to different perspectives and more ready to look at things through angles that they don't personally experience. And other people are very much kind of within their frame and caught up in their day job in a way that doesn't allow that other sounds in.
Sorry. Are you gonna ask questions now?
No, but it was about just one more question. Do you still find that you have to prove the business case for doing what you want to do, and it's important, or is that now going in the background, and mainly people want to make a change and for the better?
We still need to prove the business case. I'm an economist, as Anna mentioned, by trade, and the business case for this is so significant that those of us that have been working in this space for a while know not only is it already significant, but it's a very fast growing space because of the aging population, because of people living longer with more access needs, and actually because of changing expectations and capability that's going to differentiate commercial organisations one from the other more distinctly because of inclusive or exclusive design. So I think there is a very, very strong business case. Interestingly, I think there is still a lot of work to be done on the data side to make it easy for people to pick up and use that business case very powerfully internally to prioritise one change versus another. You can't do everything. Commercial organisations have so many demands on them for potential changes in any environment, whether we're thinking about workplace or customer. And I think we need better data about how difference across people, particularly those situational and temporary differences, impact people's customer or employee experiences, so that people can make better decisions about the prioritization. Not should you do it or not, I think we're way past that. But should I do this piece or that piece? I have 53 things I could do. Which of these will have the greatest impact on my customer base or my employee base today? That still needs work.
Right.
So, COVID. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to dwell on it, but have you faced challenges, or I mean, has it been a blessing in disguise that you've been able to focus? You haven't been running around doing your job. You've been confined to a space, so you've been able to focus more. What have you done to advance open inclusion, or what challenges have you faced as an organisation?
Like, I think everyone, particularly at this point, a year on, it's a year since I travelled to the UK. So I used to be in the UK every single week. and I have not travelled to the UK to go to the office for a year. So first thing, there's a really obvious thing, which is I'm no longer in the same space with my employees and with our panel and our community and with clients. I'm a people person. I really miss that. I'm a year into this and I genuinely miss people. And I'm a true diverse designer by nature, not just by practice. I love the diversity of perspectives, and I live in a small village in the Alps that's not famous for its diversity. So I miss people. As a business, it has changed us significantly, but possibly less than many other businesses. It's that classic, because we were set up to be inclusive before COVID hit, we were ready for this. And in fact, we have not slowed down. We have picked up speed right throughout. I'm not going to say it's a blessing in disguise or a blessing in any way. It is a pandemic that is killing people, and it is not just the loss of life, but the loss of health and the disability that will come with that, and the long-term impacts that will have on real human beings with real days that have just got harder, let alone the mental health impact that is kind of this second wave that we're really feeling now. So there's no blessing in there, but there is certainly, we can take the cost and use this period as an opportunity to learn and progress at a different rate. So the thing about challenges, whether it's a war, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's any major disruption, is disruption allows us to look at things differently faster than we could have in a stable environment. And I think we are at an absolute, the flood has come up. I'm an Australian, you might hear from my accent. So, plenty of floods and fires in Australia to always use as our analogies. But the flood has come. We're all washed into the stream. We're still being washed around by this momentum that we can't stop. However, we're not going back to the bank we came from. And there's plenty of kind of the new normal. We don't want to go back to our old normal. Well, yes, let's use this momentum to take us to somewhere we want. We can't choose everywhere we want to go, because this is still impacting our society in very significant ways, some of which we can't control at all and some of which we can. Back to my swimmer in me, I looked at how can we swim as strongly as we can towards a direction that we want to end up. It's not across the stream, it's somewhere downstream where we're being taken anyway, but let's use this momentum to end up somewhere better. The amount of digital transformation that has happened in this year is remarkable.
Yes.
I was listening to a statistic the other day that 77% of CEOs have said that they're going to increase their investment in digital transformation in the next 12 months.
Wow.
Above what they expected they would be doing, because to a large degree of the pandemic. So that is a huge amount of investment about to come into the system at a rate much faster than it was coming before because of the pandemic. And that's given us an opportunity to ensure that digital experiences are better in the future than they are today. You don't want to invest all that money and not get something better, but actually not just better for some people, but better for all people. And that's where we need to be working even harder as inclusive designers at the moment, to ensure that that money is wisely spent and has the broadest possible impact to both workplace and to consumers.
And has there been that wake-up moment for large organizations saying we should have done this sooner? And if yes, what's changed in your opinion?
Nessa, absolutely. And what's fascinating is watching the organisations, and I'm sure you've felt this as well, those organisations that were more mature February last year have been able to transition through this period of massive disruption and unrest so much more smoothly and fluidly than those that didn't have flexibility built into their system. And inclusive design by its nature is flexibility. As a community, we have all had mobility impairments now for 12 months. I'm no longer getting on planes each week and going and working, in a different location. So we have these changes that have come through, that those organisations that were set up to enable people to work from home, to have secure systems that allowed people to engage in different ways, had systems that didn't exclude people from being able to engage online and have to go into a branch or a shop or, ring a call center, they were well prepared for this, because as that shop became a high risk environment to people, or as people didn't wish to go into a branch or to ring a, if they might be deaf or hard of hearing, that call center was overwhelmed, let alone if they were excluded from using it. This has all of a sudden allowed that flexibility built in to have a much greater advantage to them. So it's where we're really seeing a massive differentiator in commercial outcomes, real value to those organisations that have stepped further forward and faster in this space.
So, okay, explain what is inclusive design. So give us a background on that.
It's a great question, and thank you for asking it, because I use the term as if everyone knew it. And it's actually, for all that I think it's been around for so long, because I've been engaging with it for so long, it's still very new to many people. I flip it on its head and say it's design that doesn't exclude. And actually, it's where I come from in, a bit of my genesis story as an inclusive designer, is I was a designer and innovator. And I can tell you that good designers get up every day to create something that is delightful. That's what you do. That's what excites you. That's what you want in the, with the products, services, or environments you're wishing to create. You don't want to frustrate people, and you most definitely don't want to have people not able to use what you're creating. The reason that people do exclude through design is they just don't know better. They don't have the tools, the insights, or the capability easily at hand to know how to design better. And that's where Open's really positioned to take that positive energy that's already sitting there. We know that people get up to try and create things that are better. Most people do. There's always extreme examples, but the majority of people get up to design to do something better.
Well, and also designers don't have a disability. So how are they supposed to empathize or even understand what the limitations are, or the
Anna, that's such an important point, that actually people, and I use design as the little d design, the kind of anyone who is responsible for creating a new or better environment, whether that's digital, physical, customer service, their own team, their own workplace. So I'm not talking about people that just officially wear the title designer, but exactly right. And in the creation community particularly, it's not a very heterogeneous community. It's actually quite a narrow community, and we need to get more people with different lived experiences into that community themselves, so they're designing with broader perspectives. But in the meantime, we can listen to broader perspectives by engaging with the communities that have them. So it's just plugging in human-centered design that's now been around for a number of decades. It's plugging in all humans, not some humans. It's not it's not an exclusive set of people that are more like you that you bring in to test an environment that you think they're going to love, and funnily enough, they do. It's bringing in people as far away in their experiences, capabilities, and needs to you as possible, and testing it with them.
Yeah.
So how much is that process, how important is the process of not just designing for inclusivity, also designing for usability? Because you can have this very bland design that everyone can access, but not many people want to go there and experience it.
So you've got all the questions here. Inclusion to me is about experience. Accessibility is about I can access it, and that's standards based and rules based. So in digital, that's your WCAG standards, and making sure that you haven't broken the rules. Now those rules are set in a really structured way, and they're crystallizing a lot of knowledge from around the world, and we love them because they provide a safety net that everyone can pick up and learn about and test against. But usability is about experience, and inclusive usability brings the two of these together, where it's about the experience of all users, and whether they're using it via an assistive technology, whether they need to adapt it in other ways, say via an operating system, whether they think differently and therefore they process that information in different ways or remember that information in different ways. That all drives their end experience and what they can do or not do with that design that's been created for them. that experience that's been created. So to me, inclusive experience includes both accessibility, don't break the rules, make sure that you don't speed, you stop at the red lights, etc., and usability, which is thinking about the journey and how much you can enjoy looking out the window on the way, the smoothness of acceleration and braking and so on. That's the the analogy of turning it into a journey.
And it's been probably not enough time to see the scientific data, but what has been the biggest change in that mindset since COVID? I mean, have you noticed anything happening in the digital platforms or the designs that some people have been straight off the mark and they've made the changes and seen the benefit, or has that not happened yet, or still time to see the impact?
COVID's been a really interesting thing. Firstly, yes, you're right. I think it's been too short for us to measure and know. But we're doing research every single week still, in fact, multiple times a week at the moment. So we have qualitative insight that I can share with you on this, which is, and we've seen organisations adapt and change over this time. So we can see from the organisational side some of what's happening. COVID specifically has impacted people. Although it's a global pandemic, the impact of the pandemic has been very inequitably spread. And it has particularly hit communities that were already disadvantaged. And we've seen this in the UK with the BAME community being particularly at risk of significant and severe COVID and death. We've seen it with the disability community, a very, very high proportion of deaths in the UK. I know certainly from the first wave, it was over 50% were people that were living with disabilities. And I apologise, it was much higher than that, but I've forgotten the exact number. But I think it was over 70%, but a very high proportion. Women in the workplace are more significantly impacted because they're also managing childcare duties to a greater degree than men. So there is these additional layers of inequality that COVID has deepened through this period, and therefore the importance of inclusive design. If you think about digital design for a moment and you think about someone trying to shop from home, say someone with multiple sclerosis, so they've got maybe some dexterity challenges, some mobility challenges, and might have brain fog that comes in and out as it fluctuates. They have to be able to manage the digital experience, and it needs to be inclusive of all of their physical and cognitive needs. Then there might also be something in the journey that is different to that, such as delivery. And they're particularly at risk. So they do not want to be the person in the shop with the mask on, getting around. They really want to be able to do this from home. So that's where having that end-to-end journey considered, so that delivery is not dropped at the bottom of their 3 steps that they can't get down in their scooter, but actually brought to the front door and left there, and that they can leave a note that says, this is incredibly important to me, please identify that. And potentially that they are prioritised relative to other parts of the community that at lower risk could go into a store and do their top-up shop. This is where the impact and the importance, both of these have gone up in multiple, exponentially over this period relative to pre-COVID.
I personally think one of the biggest gains of flexible working has obviously been really high up on that people can now do the work, not have to come to an office. But video conferencing has been a game changer for a lot of people. That communication face-to-face, when people prefer to have that. But more importantly, the provision of captioning, because people often don't declare the disabilities, and having captioning is such an amazing freedom to people to be able to do this while they get on with something else as well. So it's a kind of a universal accessibility rather than just because you have a condition that needs that help. So I think that's been very helpful, and more you see people consider those vital rather than just add-on. So I think that's been a eureka moment for businesses, that extra number of engagement. It's actually for them is proving absolutely vital for future planning and future inclusion projects.
That's absolutely. And just on that note, there is a ratchet effect that I can talk to with a specific example. One of the ladies that that I know very well. She's a student doing her master's degree at the moment. And when she asked for some accommodations and consideration to be able to work at distance, 2 years ago, she was told by the university, absolutely no chance, we can't possibly do that. Within a month of COVID, she had 100% of the accommodation she needed to be able to be what she is, which is a brilliant master's student of psychology at the same university with the same team. All they had to do was turn on that capability. As soon as they had the scale to do it, it was there. They can never go back from that moment. And she and I were talking about this last year, which is once you've turned that on, you can never go back and use that comment again that we can't possibly do it here, because you've done it. It's been proven. And it worked.
I think the accommodation that we could make nowadays is for non-disabled people to go back to what they used to do before COVID. I mean,
Yes.
Going back to office is a luxury nowadays.
And this is a really interesting point too, that not everyone wants to engage online.
Yeah.
And just because it's accessible doesn't mean it's inclusive.
Yeah,
So yes,
absolutely.
I may be able to do a lot of what I can do online, and I've gone to lots of conferences and spoken at them and been involved in them over the last year. But as a human, I'm incredibly, Nessa, I'm a human's human. I love people. I really genuinely miss seeing people and having the conversations in the halls outside of those formal events, to actually hear about the rest of what they're doing, and to follow questions and go down little rabbit holes and have that time. And what we're going to now see is we need to create a hybrid environment where people have the option to step in or out of at the times that are suitable to them and in ways that are more effective. There's going to be some nice advantages of this for everyone.
Well, I think we thrive on freedom, options, choices, and I think we've got that now. Thank God for the, at least for the little gains we've got from COVID. These are some of the positives that we'll maintain.
Yeah,
Anna,
absolutely.
we want to stay on track.
Yeah, well, yes, but it's always fun when you interject with your left field questions there, Nessa. So, this is a conversation with a great woman. So you can ask, we've already checked with Christine if she didn't mind some of these left field questions from Dr. Nassa. So what about the cost? So you provide insights and research and, create the customer offerings and workplace environments. Isn't it expensive?
Yeah, a lot of people have this perception. I think it's one of the real myths that stops people moving forward. And whether it's accessibility, inclusive insight, they kind of go, but isn't this really costly? What's the payback? And it goes back to that question Nessa asked before about the return on investment. Nobody wonders, is there a cost in creating a service for, 40% of a market, a target market that you want, that's going to make it more delightful for them and differentiate you better relative to your competitors, either in getting talent or in getting, customers and keeping your customers. Yet for some reason, people, when it comes to accessibility and inclusion, seem to see this as a cost. And I think there's two reasons for this. One is it comes out of a compliance mentality. And if you're doing this as an insurance premium, if that's the mentality you bring, which is I'm trying to not get sued or I'm trying to not break the rules, then we all want to minimize an insurance premium, because essentially, as long as all insurance is the same, you don't care as long as the cost is as low as you can and you've just covered your premium. If you see this as a strategic advantage, however, it's a very different mindset you bring to it. If you see that as 20% of the community today identify permanently as disabled, 33%, 1 in 3 of your customers will have an access need today, including temporary and situational needs. Temporary, not even situational. So temporary needs, so a broken leg, sick, going through a recovery from long COVID, etc. 4 in 10, so 2 in 5 people have someone with a disability in the household they're making decisions for. So if I'm buying a kettle, I need to consider the needs of everyone in my household, not just me. So that consideration is part of my buying decision. And 100% of us have disabilities from time to time, temporarily or as we age increasingly. So the lovely thing about inclusive design is actually this is a real differentiator to just greater market traction with very significant parts of the market. So there is cost. That cost can also be managed. You don't need to do, an end-to-end program of hundreds of billions of dollars. This is actually start small, start early, and do often has always been my call in this space. And actually just taking those first couple of really practical steps of just listening to a few of your customers that are very different and have quite different perspectives from each other and very different perspectives from you will give you a start. It's qualitative, it's not all of your customers, but just get started somewhere. Even if you have no budget and you've got an opportunity to understand, go and engage with some of your employees that have disabilities, go and engage with some of your community to of customers that might be already engaging with the organization. Just start.
Yeah, actually, I've got one comment and one question for you. The comment is the intelligent design. You're absolutely right. If you don't know what your customers want, it's equivalent to a friend of mine who's blind, who said, going to some of these online shopping platforms, the most popular one, it's same as having an autistic person going into a very noisy and bright room. Their senses get overwhelmed with all this, the signals coming. And if you're blind and you go into this shopping and they've got so much flashing offering going on, you don't know where to go. You just shut down and you leave. So, and that is kind of a comment that a good friend of ours, everyone knows Phil Friend, he's a wheelchair user, and he was saying, look, I'm a father of a family, have kids, and I go shopping for them. If that entrance to the shop is not accessible, they've not just lost my business, they've lost the business of my children as well. I need to buy Snickers for them. I need to buy. So in a way, if you go to this example of a friend who is blind, he is actually head of the family, and he wants to buy something. He will go to a site which is much easier. It may not be as fancy and it's got bells and whistles, but it definitely is practical for me to go in there. And that engagement is extremely important. We found that in all aspects. So going back to my question, who are your natural allies to get this conversation, the agenda, front and center of organizations? Do you go to architects? Do you go to finance people? Do you go to CEOs? What are the real natural people that you need to get friendly with and get them to see the picture, bigger picture?
Yeah, really good question, Nasser. In many organizations, there will be a few people that really get this. They might have some personal experience either themselves or through their family. They might have actually just started getting curious and having, gone and joined like the London Accessibility Meetup, started to learn. And once you've seen the value in this space and the opportunity in this space, it's very, very hard to unsee it. It's very hard to not get passionate and excited about it because it is such an exciting space to create just fundamentally better things. So there's quite often people, and they can sit anywhere in the organization. I was talking to someone this morning who was a very senior finance person in a very creative organization. She was in finance. This is not the most creative part of the organization, but she was that person. In other organizations, the kind of role that is most resonant, I think, head of customer experience, head of research and insight, head of design, and someone creating new product or innovation. They get it because they're tasked with understanding how product market fit happens. You can't do that without understanding the market. They recognize the market is always moving. They're responsible for listening to market, so they're already aware how diverse and how beautifully human humans are. It's the one thing that we have absolutely consistent across all humans is our difference. And people that work in those roles tend to understand that because their role requires them to, at least to some degree, understand that.
So some of our guests today are probably quite passionate, want to make that change, want to bring about a real change. But so would they find their natural allies, let's say, in marketing, because they interact with customers, they know what customers want, or do they go back to people who really want to be more inclusion, as in because the agenda of we want to be a caring employer. So do you have a good advice on how they go about bringing a change to their organization if it's not happening quickly enough?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very respectful of all roles in an organization. However, I would most like to see inclusive design driven from the commercial elements of the organization. I don't see this as CSR. This is not about make the organization feel good by doing something nice and it's part of your charity days. And this is really commercially valuable. There's nothing wrong with having it in CSR, and that's where people wish to spend their days, that if they're given free days to go and spend their time with disability organisations and so on, that's fine. But this is commercially valuable and will help your organisation be more viable. So let's land it in the places that care about the strategic commercial value of the organisation. That is actually the CFO. That is the head of product. That is the head of customer experience. They are senior people responsible for revenue.
So you actually put a very good point. Sustainability is as important as actually doing it. So once you've done it, somebody needs to monitor that it's still giving you the benefits that you just set out. Otherwise, we've noticed focus goes away with the person who actually initiated it. And we need to make sure that remains very strong at the center of any company's future strategies.
Absolutely, NASA. And interesting, lovely segue into, we considered inclusive customer experience, and there's a lot of different ways you can pick up on it around an organization, and a lot of different levers you can pull inside an organization to improve and progress it. And if anyone's interested, on our website, and I'll ask that we put this in the notes after, but there's an inclusive customer experience framework that we've shared openly with anyone who wants it. And there's essentially two things you can do once you realize you've got a need, you've got an unmet customer group that has a bad experience in your organization today. There is one which is improve the product, the service or environment, fix the digital app, make sure that there's a ramp at the front door, make sure your customer service staff are trained in disability confidence and competence. That's the kind of fixing the environment. What you're just talking to is the very strategic and embedded capability to ensure that that's not fixed one-off and then slowly retrogrades over time, but that you build the competence into the organization so that you can repeat that when the next app comes out, or when the next staff member comes and joins the organization, or when the next building is built. So that's that process, policy, leadership, measures and metrics, and culture of an organization that allows that to happen more consistently, more effectively over time.
Like a business as usual, rather than a fringe. Absolutely. And I'm conscious of time. Do you have any? We want to move on to questions and answers as well.
Yeah, we do, but I have a couple of other questions. So Microlink provide workplace adjustments and productivity solutions for some of the UK's largest organisations. How could, or does, or can open inclusion support those efforts to give companies a better understanding of their environment and needs?
Yeah, it's the collaboration. And actually, so one of the founding principles of open is collaboration. We don't try and be all things to an organisation. We have the one thing we do really well, which is help people listen to diverse experience and understand what to do with that. We don't actually deliver on the services for that. So as an example, with employees, we can do voice of employee and diverse employees. Today, about 2 to 3% across the UK of employees will note to their employer that they have a disability and will be confident disclosing that, or they might have a visible disability where they have no option but to disclose that because they're wheeling into the work in or have a service dog or what have you. So the labour force statistics tell us that 20% of the workforce has a disability. So there is about 17 to 18% of any workforce that is not known to the employer, but may benefit from better design of the workforce and an ability to reach to the sorts of products and services and solutions that great organisations like yourselves can go and provide to them. So we can help the organisation understand that gap in a confident and confidential way, where employers can tell us of how their experience in that workplace is and where they might have unmet needs. Your organization can go and solve for that and actually make sure that that gap can be closed so that people can bring their full selves to work and be as efficient and capable and not just do the role they're in, but progress through the organization doing greater and more effective roles more efficiently.
My experience in UK, we're extremely fortunate. UK is very advanced in that mindset and the culture. I know by and large employees do want to do the right thing, but sometimes they don't know there is a problem, which you mentioned. People don't disclose because they kind of don't think they might get anything out of it, so why bother? And the second part is if they know they have a problem, they actually say, well, I don't know how to fix it. So hence they're looking for a solution. They're not looking to push away their responsibilities or be a bad employer. So we find, again, they're much more receptive to ideas of how to fix a problem. And the third part, which you've put your finger on in the past, the cost. The cost of not doing it, we find, is a lot higher than doing it. Hence,
I'm glad we came back to cost, NASA, because when I talked about it before, I thought I kind of planted a flag in my brain and I really wanted to come back to this. There's hidden cost and benefit, and there's directly visible cost and benefit. And the challenge we've got in inclusion, whether it's workplace adjustments, whether it's digital accessibility, whether any part of inclusion, is there is a visible cost and there is often a hidden benefit. When I said before we need to work much harder in the return on investment in this space, we need to make that hidden benefit more explicit and more available and visible to organisations to see, measure and understand, because they intuitively get it. And Nessa, I'm with you. I think the UK has actually done a great job in working across other countries as we are at the moment. I think the UK is one of, very mature in their understanding, both in customer and workplace. They want the greatest talent and they want to both access and retain the best customers. They get this, but they need help along that way.
Well, actually, one of the points that you've just raised, and that funding, because they sit in different silos, it's hard for people to measure the benefits. And I think financial benefits is a very good incentive, especially when you talk to CFOs. Why am I going to save the money? It's not that I want to do what is right for me, but I do actually want to see the benefits. I do like to measure it. And we often find that we do workplace adjustment. It's a great outcome. People do actually end up doing the work they're paid to do with less absenteeism and more productivity, better engagement. Yet the people who spend money, they notice the budget obviously increasing if they are making more adjustments, but nobody's telling them, by the way, you just saved us £1 million on absenteeism or £500,000 in legal litigations we've had. So that has become a bit of a challenge of trying to bring the data together, show it to the right people to make sure they're not doing the wrong thing. If anything, not only they've improved their well-being of the workforce, they've also helping the bottom line, which is at the end of the day, competition is quite tough out there and they need to make every penny. And by showing them those benefits of outweighing their cost, hopefully we can get more buy-in.
And Nessa, this is something when you're talking to Caroline, you'll speak about as well, but she and I have some cunning plans in this space. I am an economist by trade. This data problem can be solved, and it is going to be solved in the next 5 years, guaranteed.
That was my next question. How do you see inclusive design evolving over the next 5 years? So you basically just said it's going to be solved.
Is inclusive design going to be solved? Not fully, but I'm very, very optimistic. I see the trajectory of inclusive design right now. It has just hit a springboard, and COVID to some degree has created part of that springboard. So I see a maturing of this space, a maturing of awareness of it, but also the tools and the capability and the reach to do it happening quite rapidly now. There has been a changing tide. It is moving quite quickly, and I'm very, very optimistic. I hope that in 5 to 10 years' time, I'm old enough that I remember back to the early noughties when we were doing digital design, and you'd have 3 or 4 experts in a room that understood a process really well, would write up the process, and you do your wireframes and so on. And then you'd have coders that would pick it up and go and create it. And then you'd throw it out to market. And not surprisingly, you didn't understand the market well enough. Some things would be brilliant, some would be terrible. And this whole movement of user experience came in. Steve Cook came along and I said, just go and ask 6 users and you'll get so much insight that you'll create something so much better. You'll know how powerful that is. And we all kind of got on that bandwagon and went, oh my gosh, how did we ever think that we could create something without users involved at the beginning? I see exactly the same thing happening in inclusive design now. Once people have included people with really specific needs in their design process early on, before it gets thrown to market and they fail people, they see how powerful it is, not just for accessibility, so to not fail people, to not do the wrong thing, but actually for design, to make something fundamentally more delightful for everyone, that once people have done it, they're not going to go backwards. That power will be taken forward. So I think we're on a wave of change, and what's called inclusive design today, I hope we won't call it inclusive design.
It'll just be design.
It's just good design or bad design.
Actually, that's a often question that the doctors will say. I like to see a society with no patients. I'm out of a job, but I like to see a healthy society. In our particular situation, if all the employees were inclusive, potentially wouldn't need us. But however, what we've learned over the years are how to get that extra amount of productivity out of people. It will apply to every population, every member of that organization. So we are able, from what we have learned, how to make people who don't seemingly have any conditions to be a lot better in doing their job, using the principles we've used for people with disabilities. One question for you from the audience: how can I find out what is working?
Great question. Thank you, whoever asked that.
Elsena Jeffers.
Lovely question. Thank you. What is working is, and I'm going to keep in my mind one particular organisation where we started engaging with them just one-off for one project that they really saw they needed some inclusive insight for a number of years ago. And they start engaging, start seeing it, start building their own competence. And it's actually a nice segue, Nasser, to what you were just talking about, the kind of doctor analogy of not needing doctors. I think we'll always be needed, but I don't want to be working in the same space in the future that we were working in the past, because what's really working for the organisations that we work with is we're maturing the capability in the organisation, so they're now doing what we used to do for them, and we can then work with them now at the more complex problems and at the edges of the experience that they don't yet have. So there's always a maturing and there's always more space to go to, but let's let as much of that capability as possible go into the organization, work alongside and with your design teams. So getting insight into design as it happens. So as someone's thinking, I'd like to create a new app, or we're thinking about a new store design, or we have a new system we're considering for our workplace, that is the time to get people with specific access needs, disabilities, older users, different digital competence, the edges of the spectrum, get them in, get that insight in, make the progression there, but don't just leave it in that environment. Take the learnings from that, put it back in the organization, so that next time you're doing something, bringing a new workplace solution in, creating a new built environment or a new app, that you've got the learnings from that to start with, and then you springboard forward from there again. That works, and we've seen that work in organizations.
Any particular sectors that have done particularly well from this experience, and any sector is still well behind and they need to catch up?
Yes. Interestingly, actually, I think that, I come from a banking and finance background, so it might be just a bit of personal bias, but I've been really pleased to see the banking sector in the UK take this on. I think partly triggered by failure. There's nothing like a bit of failure to make people very conscious of having to rebuild trust with their customers. But the 2007-8 experience in the UK of bank failures and loss of trust has meant the banks we have seen working really hard to regain the trust. They have very, very broad and diverse consumer bases, especially the retail banks I'm particularly talking about. And the cost of getting it wrong is very explicit to them. If they can't make digital banking, for example, a really lovely experience, people will then use the contact centres or come into the branch. So that cost of next best alternative for a consumer, for one of their customers, is very high for them. So there's a lot of reason financially for them to get it right, as well as the kind of trust and relationship side. Some of the ones further behind, I think organisations where they're further away from their customer, the organisations, say in the entertainment space or in spaces where you've really got to have your finger on the pulse all the time, simply to have an offering in a very competitive space, intuitively will be closer to their customer and understand this better. Those that are monopolies, oligopolies, where there's very few players, not so competitive, not so engaged with their customers, they find it harder.
Right. We have time for one more question, Anna.
Well, I usually wrap up around now. We're 3 minutes to the end, and I'm sure Christine would like to take a sip of coffee, because you haven't yet. I've been thinking you need a drink. So really, I just want to say a call to action. What call to action would you like to leave our attendees with? They could sign up to get involved with xraccess.org. That'll be all on the resource page that we send out. Or, as I understand, you're having a symposium in June?
Yes, so a couple of things. So firstly, if you're interested in inclusive design more broadly, just reach out to us, reach out to myself, Christine, at openinclusion.com, or just via our website. You can find contact at openinclusion.com. We'd be really delighted to talk to you about what we do, how we do it, and why that might have an impact on your organisation. If you're interested in getting involved in the more innovative areas of inclusion, if you're an innovator in your organisation, there is so much that inclusive design can really support, whether it's, you mentioned XR Access there, whether it's voice technologies, voice UIs, whether it's people working in new mobility. There's a lot of spaces that are changing quite rapidly. There is a particular advantage to inclusive insight for those. So you mentioned, I've been involved in XR Access, which is the immersive accessibility community globally. If people are interested in immersive design, come and join that. There's a great group of people that are really engaging in how do we ensure that as VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, haptics, these fabulous more immersive experiences, as they become born, how do we ensure they're born inclusive to start with? We don't exclude a whole population, then have to retrofit back like we did with the phone. That we actually consider those needs now. It'll make them better experiences for everyone. So if that's something that's your thing, come and join that community. There's and there's a lot of equivalent communities to that. And engage with people that swim to success. Someone who isn't me, just start. This is a long journey. Nobody's going to get there. It's not a journey that ever finishes, because humans are always changing. Our technologies and our capabilities and our ability to solve problems are always changing. So to NASA's point of no doctors required, well, the doctors will always be required, but with the new technologies, with the new things that really require absolute expertise. So this is a journey we're all on. Open inclusion isn't perfect. I recognise that we're on this journey just like any of our organisations we work with. So just start on it. Don't get scared by the scale of it. Start small, do little bits that you can control, and just start building some momentum, start having some conversations, and engage with the community of people with really diverse and different experiences, specifically those with disabilities, whether they identify as that, or whether they're just older people that might have, increasing access needs that don't identify as disabled. But go to the edges of experience, because that's where the real power of insight is.
Knowledge is power. So the more questions you ask, and the more things you learn, and the more groups you get involved with, the wider your understanding of other people's needs. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's been a really, really good talk, and I really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for making time, Christina, and we really enjoyed every minute of your wisdom as well. Thank you, and hope to see you in our future events, because this is not going away. We are making a regular season, and we'd like you to come back and inform and educate us on this fascinating area.
Oh, and same the other way around. We're always learning from each other. We learn as much from you and your organisation, Nasser, as you do from us. So mutual.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to My Clear Text, who's kept up with everything perfectly. Thank you very much, Kat.
Above all, thank you to all our audience who've given us their valuable time, and really we hope you found it interesting and useful. Next week we have another great guest, and
Johnny.
We can't run out of great women. The more I look at this area, I find women are really leaders in every aspect of inclusion. So I'm delighted we started this, and I think it's going to carry on for quite a while.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you all next week. Thank you,
you.
Christine.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.